Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. I hope you and Louise are doing okay.
All is well so far, and I hope the same is true for you and Sherry.
We're back. We're vaccinated, and we still wear that mask. And
there you go. This is our first week in the studio. We're back in the studio for our first week.
Well, wow. We may not get back in our studio until September.
Remarkable.
Remarkable. That's questionable.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I laid out a theory this morning in an op-ed I wrote, and I was talking about it in the first hour, and I wanted to get your take on it. And that is that America, in our Declaration of Independence, given the times, I mean, it was written by slaveholders, and we all get that, their language and their actions were very, very different things. But basically, the Declaration of Independence makes two promises. The first is that, two promises. The first is that people can govern themselves. We don't need no stinking kings or queens or popes. We can govern ourselves. Thank you very much. And we've largely accomplished that, over 240 years. The second is that all people are created equal and therefore should have equal opportunity under the law. Now, it doesn't lay it out like that in the Declaration, and the Constitution even contradicted that, as did early law for, 100 years. 150, arguably 200 years. But is it possible that America could lead the world in accomplishing this? We have a couple of what appear to be successful multiracial societies in South Africa, in Cuba, some argue Malaysia. But most of the world is made up of basically ethnostates. You're a citizen of this country because of the way you look or who you are or where you came from, that kind of thing. Can America transcend that? Can we become the first really pluralistic, multiracial, multi-religious society successfully, and then become a standard for the world, the way we have with regard to democracy over 240 years? Do you think that's even possible? And if so, how do we get there?
Well, let's go back to the history. Let's start with history. Look, first of all, the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson, was a contradiction himself. I mean, let's start there, and didn't believe that for all practical purposes that anybody other than white men could govern,
right,
or be governed, and so I think that's what people have to understand. The other issue that you bring up is that even Lincoln, the great emancipator, didn't believe. And if you read Lerone Bennett's books and history from the great Lerone Bennett, the historian who worked for years, decades for Ebony magazine, he writes how reluctant even Lincoln was.
Yes.
But having said that, to answer your question directly, yeah, I think that the United States of America, as a government, as a society, can do just what you suggested. It can be done. No ifs, ands, buts about it. But as I was listening to, just before coming on, your reading, the problem is it's up to the people. We those of us who understand that it can be done, we have to become activists. We have to, take control of our Congress. The propagandists are very good at what they do. I had a caller to my show who says, "Here's what they use, Tom. They dismiss, they discredit, they demonize, and then they destroy."
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the Fox, as you say all the time, the talk show haters are. The talk show
hate radio guys,
haters, hate radio guys, and Fox. And understand, when you were talking about Germany, that's exactly what the Nazis did. They dismissed everybody. They discredited people who weren't with them. They demonized all the folks who wanted equality and opportunity, and then they destroyed. Now, what I believe, what I hope would happen, and that is that I hope these folks who we're talking about, I hope they destroy themselves. I mean, the Republican Party right now is in a shambles, and Tom, it is absolutely amazing. A year after George Floyd's murder, that the only group holding up the passage of that bill, that meeting today at the White House should have been a bill signing ceremony.
Yep.
And there's only one reason it wasn't, and that is that you have Republicans who are more afraid of Donald Trump's base than they are of the majority of their constituents.
Which is the white racist base in America, if I may interrupt. You are you're not interrupting. You are absolutely 100% correct. Yep. And so that's where we are. But I believe your theory. I believe what you wrote today is absolutely right. So,
but
Joe,
I think we also have to be honest about history.
Oh, yeah, and I'm trying to be, very much so. I mean, it wasn't until 1965 that we actually did away with racial quotas on immigration. I mean, you could really say that 65 was the year when America finally embraced this promise. So we have 2 minutes to a hard break, Joe. Where would you begin with this? It seems to me like reparations would be a piece of this. You know, economic equality. We have to put law into place. You know, justice equality. We have to reform police. Where do we begin?
Well, all of the above. All of the above. It's not a question of one or the other. It's all of the above. Right. You mentioned South Africa. Understand that one of the things that South Africa did once it dismantled apartheid, they did what? They had what they call truth and reconciliation. Right. What we've never had in the United States of America is truth and reconciliation.
You're right.
We have to have that. Now, what form does it take? I don't know. I don't know exactly what form it takes, but it's got to be more than just an intellectual exercise.
Can you imagine Lindsey Graham having to get up and give a speech and apologize for the racism of the Republican Party, essentially in order to continue to be a functioning member of society like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission did?
Hell, I can't even imagine Tim Scott doing it. And the only thing, the only thing I can imagine, Lindsey, what I imagine is Lindsey Graham one day being defeated.
Yeah,
and not in Congress. And I bring up Tim Scott because Malcolm X always had a saying that whenever a black man stands up and speaks out against racism and white supremacy, the other side always finds some other black person to contradict what they say.
Right.
That's part of history, too. Race and reconciliation on a meaningful scale is what this country first has to do.
Yep, I agree. I think that absolutely brilliant. The great Joe Madison. Joe, thanks so much for dropping by. It's great talking with you.